Hey. I'm going to invite all the witnesses to come up to the table.
Yeah, we need to have one on the panel, right?
Yes. And without objection, a statement from Senator Hatch on an opening statement will be entered.
Thank you.
Again, I want to say publicly my appreciation to Senator Hutchinson. There are moments in your congressional life that you enjoy, and at the end of the day, you have some degree of success in achieving a legislative goal. And the opportunity, the privilege that I had to work with Senator Hutchinson, where the two of us worked seamlessly together back in the summer, first to get the NASA authorization bill through this committee, and then as one of the last agenda items to be able to have it pass with unanimous consent late at night on the last night of the session it was either the last week of July or first week of August, I can't remember which. And then for us to, then in September, one of the last things to pass in the House of Representatives, I give great credit to Steny Hoyer, who put it on the consent calendar, and at the beginning of the day, of that last day of the House of Representatives deliberations, people didn't think we had the required two-thirds vote in the House in order to pass the NASA bill. When the vote was tallied late that night, one of the last items in the House of Representatives, it was a three-quarters vote. And again, I give great credit to Senator Hutchinson, as I have stated many times before, in the sheer pleasure of working with her in trying to correct the misstatements, the incorrect information, sometimes the mischief that was directed at the NASA authorization bill. And so now we have a bill that has been signed into law. It is the law, and that is the purpose of this hearing, is to have these very erudite folks to explain to us the implementation of the law. We do this in this full Commerce Committee hearing not only in our oversight capacity to oversee the implementation of laws in the executive branch of government, but we do it also given some of the uncertainties that we face. The uncertainty of the actual funding level, since we are well into the new fiscal year. And yet we have a roadmap, we have a blueprint of what NASA can, should, and will do over the course of this fiscal year. And we're going to flesh that out in the course of this hearing. We're going to flesh it out as we see what is done in appropriations with a continuing resolution or an omnibus appropriations or whatever it is, because something has to be passed because the United States government has to continue to function. But this authorization bill is more than that. It is a 3-year authorization. Because on a program like the space program, you simply have to give direction over a long period of time. And that direction is now law. So with that, let me turn to the lady who has been such a great partner. Thank you, Senator Hutchinson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly appreciate what you have said and agree that we worked hand in hand, hand in glove, completely together in a bipartisan way, helped by Senator Vitter, Senator Landrieu from Louisiana, from many of our colleagues, Senator Lemieux from Florida, Senator Hatch, who has submitted a statement, and Senator Bennett, Senator Shelby and Senator Sessions, so many, and Senator Cochran, of course, and Senator Wicker. So many people came together on a very bipartisan basis, and the law was passed overwhelmingly in the House and unanimously in the Senate. And it started, of course, when a plan came out from the President that really did not have congressional consultation. That's the President's right to lay out his vision, of course, but we worked then from that vision, took some parts of it, and rejected some parts of it, and I think came together working with the administration in a productive way for a way forward that would have both congressional implementation and with the consent of the President, who did sign the bill. I think that the Chairman and I and many others are concerned about some of the delays in implementation. And if I had to summarize my view, it would be that delay could cost success. If we are going to succeed in the new launch vehicle, we have to have a design based on as many of the technology that has already been developed and tested as possible, and certainly the heavy lift booster and capsule design has to be the first priority. And if there are any concerns about that implementation, or if there are impediments to it, we want to know right now, because we do still have the opportunity to put other words in the law if that's what it takes. But in order to succeed, we must be able to count on the administration fulfilling the requirements of the law and working with Congress in a collegial spirit, I hope, to do what the direction is that has been passed overwhelmingly by Congress and, of course, signed by the President. We are going to have hearings, we're going to have oversight, and I would say that any of us are available going forward to hear the impediments, if there are impediments, right up front, as opposed to getting reports from other sources that there are some in the industry who would like to only implement the original plan of the President, and some within the agency who might have that view. The original plan is not the now law of the land. And so we want to work in a spirit of cooperation. I will just end by saying that space exploration is part of the golden history of this country. It is also essential to our future. If we are going to use the space station in a productive way, if we are going to innovate, create, have the capability to look into sources of energy that can best be done at the space station or beyond, we're going to have to go forward in the plan that has been put forward by Congress and signed by the President for us to be successful. If it is dragged out and we don't have a design and we don't have a budget that would meet the test of the design, we could lose the whole thing and see other countries take precedence over America in the exploration of space. So I hope that we learned something today that either says, yes, we're all full steam ahead, yes, we're going to use all the brains in the agency to put together the budget that will allow our new design and our goals that I know are similar to go forward and succeed, or if there are impediments, what are they? Let's work on them together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Vitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly join in your and Senator Hutchison's remarks, and thank you both for your leadership on this issue. It's been a pleasure for me to work with you all and others, including on the authorization bill. I was very pleased with that outcome as well, but now we need to implement that bill. And really the question at this hearing is the administration going to be a full, active, positive partner in implementing that bill? That's the question. I think that's exactly what Senator Hutchison was talking about. From my perspective, the evidence so far is that the answer is no. And I hope to God that changes, and I hope to God I'm wrong. But quite frankly, so far, the evidence isn't there that the administration wants to be a full, active, positive partner. Now, I know from reading your testimony that there is concern specifically about language in last year's appropriation bill prohibiting the cancellation of Constellation programs and starting new programs. Let me say that all of us are working on language to correct that and to take away any impediment that provides that we hope to insert in a CR or an omnibus bill or whatever. So I think we're all on the same page working on clarifying language. Having said that, I really think pointing to that language and justifying a lot of inactivity so far on that, I'm not saying that language is irrelevant, but I really think it's largely an excuse. I mean, the irony is pretty clear. Before this new authorization bill, the administration was doing absolutely everything it could administratively to shut down Constellation programs. Now, after the new authorization bill has passed, the administration is pointing to that language saying, oh, we can't possibly end Constellation and stop those programs, essentially arguing exactly the opposite. Now, again, I'm not saying that language doesn't have some effect, doesn't impose some limits, but I think the administration could be doing a whole lot more implementing the vision of the new authorization bill if it were really committed to do that. And I think what we're here today to talk about is that level of commitment and how we move forward on the same page to implement that vision in the authorization bill. Again, I think so far the evidence is that the administration isn't there. But I hope that's wrong, and I hope that changes, and I'm eager for that to change, and certainly committed to working on anything we need to work on legislatively to clear away any remaining hurdles like the language from last year's appropriation bill. So that's what I came to talk about and to hear from these key administration officials. Thank you for calling the hearing, and I look forward to the discussion.
Senator Begich.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any comments. I'm anxious to hear how they're doing the implementation and their presentations.
Well, I just want to comment, Senator Vitter, that unfortunately, I think your comments are well-founded. Your concerns are well-founded. Because there were too many times in the course of us building consensus over the course of trying to pass it in this committee, with the legislative clock running out, pushed up against the August work recess, and then the same thing repeating itself again in the House of Representatives, running up against the legislative clock, going up, right up to the end, that we found too many times in the attempts of building consensus that there was too much evidence that the administration was not helping. Now, I might say that was not from the highest levels of the White House. To the contrary, I found it elsewhere. And that brings us to the table today to now that the President supported this bill in the committee, on the floor, and then through the situation in the House where we had run out of time in the House. We didn't have time to sit down and negotiate differences between the House and the Senate, and they ended up being in the position of having to accept the Senate bill or no bill. And I give great credit to Chairman Bart Gordon and Ranking Member Ralph Hall. Without their leadership, this never would have happened. And yet we were finding forces that were trying to undo us. Now, that is history. We passed it. The President signed it into law. And now we want that law implemented. And given the uncertainties of the funding, which I think at the end of the day is going to be less uncertain than you would think, because this authorization bill authorizes $19 billion in fiscal year 11. And if we just get a continuing resolution of fiscal year 2010, NASA's funding there is $18.7 billion. That's, in this context of this economic recession that we're in, $300 million less than a $19 billion authorization. That's 1.67% of the total authorization that would be less. Then we want to see this law implemented without a lot of griping and moaning and groaning if we're able to get that kind of appropriation. So it's in that spirit that we come here to the table for this hearing, and we're very honored to have the President's Science Advisor, Dr. Holdren, Beth Robinson, the Chief Financial Officer of NASA, Cristina Chaplain, the Director of Acquisition and Sourcing Management from GAO, accompanied by Mrs. Susan Poling. And so we're going to ask for your comments. If I could ask you all to keep your comments somewhere around 5 minutes, and then we can get into the give and take that this committee likes to do. So, Dr. Holdren, welcome.
Thank you very much. Doesn't seem to be going on. Maybe we can transfer over.
I think it's on.
Is that on? Yeah, I guess it is on. Thank you. Well, Chairman Nelson, Ranking Member Hutchison, members of the committee, I'm happy to be here today to discuss America's future in space and how to maximize the probability of success following the recent passage and signing of the 2010 Authorization Act for NASA. Under the direction provided by that legislation, NASA will be entering a new era of innovation, of exploration, of discovery. And I want to commend and thank Chairman Nelson and Ranking Member Hutchison, and indeed all of the members of the committee and your staffs for the work you did in forging the key agreements that were necessary to get this legislation done, and for the work you did to bring it into effect. When I testified before this committee in May, I talked about the President's strategy for U.S. human exploration activities in space as reflected in his FY 2011 budget request, and further elaborated in the speech he gave in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center on April 15th. That new approach as you know, included fostering the development of path-breaking new technologies, partnering with industry in new and more effective ways, advancing innovation and scientific discovery, pursuing human exploration of space with a more flexible, achievable, and affordable set of goals, and, of course, addressing the overarching need to match program goals with resources. That approach was developed in order to take us to more places sooner, but also more affordably, while spurring the creation of new industries, new technologies, and jobs. The 2010 NASA Authorization Act that you folks worked so hard to bring about represents a crucial step forward toward achieving the President's goals, and I think the country's goals, in this arena, including extending the International Space Station effort until at least 2020 and supporting the goal of using that research outpost effectively, including helping to advance a U.S. commercial crew transportation industry that can become the primary means of access to the International Space Station, thereby harnessing the nation's entrepreneurial energies in more effective ways and creating new jobs, while at the same time, of course, meeting a critical national need, including accelerating the development of a heavy lift vehicle relative to what was planned under the Constellation program, including reinforcing an approach to human space exploration that will enable us to reach a range of destinations, including near-Earth asteroids, the moons of Mars, and eventually Mars itself, including initiating a new space technology program to increase our capability and decrease the cost of these activities, including supporting the President's proposal to modernize the Space Launch Complex in Florida, which will help those facilities more effectively support future NASA, other government, and commercial launches, including supporting a revitalized program in Earth science, enabling NASA to develop new satellites and other capabilities that are priorities in our efforts to enhance U.S. leadership in global climate change research, including authorizing a robust aeronautics research program that will invest more in green aviation and in a more efficient national air transportation system, which will help to promote both the economic and the environmental health of this country. This important change in direction not only helps to chart a new path forward in space, it also helps us invest in the foundation for the skilled jobs and industries of the future. At the same time, it furthers our goal of placing NASA's programs on a more stable footing and enhancing the long-term sustainability of those efforts. As with any space-related endeavor of the scope and complexity of those outlined in the Authorization Act, there will be, of course, technical cost and programmatic challenges going forward as the projects are undertaken and future appropriations are provided. Indeed, obviously, a lot of work lies ahead in terms of translating this important new law into programmatic success. One immediate challenge, as has already been noted, is the current lack of appropriations for fiscal year 2011, and the administration very much hopes that Congress will act swiftly to provide the funding and budgetary guidance that will enable NASA to fully implement the direction provided in the NASA Authorization Act of 2010 and bring that new plan to fruition. Whatever the challenges that may be faced, I'm confident that Administrator Bolden and the dedicated men and women of NASA's workforce have the commitment, the wherewithal, and the passion that will be needed to pursue those initiatives and continue to make progress toward achieving our ambitions in this renewed journey of innovation and discovery in space. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with Administrator Bolden and the other involved offices and agencies in the government as NASA moves to develop more detailed implementation and acquisition approaches in the months ahead. Let me close by reiterating that this administration, starting with President Obama himself, remains steadfast in our commitment to space exploration and to NASA's mission. As the President said in his speech at the Kennedy Space Center, and I now quote, "I am 100% committed to the mission of NASA and its future, because broadening our capabilities in space will continue to serve our society in ways that we can scarcely imagine. Because exploration will once more inspire wonder in a new generation, sparking passions and launching careers. And because ultimately, if we fail to press forward in the pursuit of discovery, we are ceding our future and we are ceding that essential element of the American character." The administration looks forward very much to continuing to work with this committee and the rest of Congress to achieve our shared goals and ambitions in space as we move forward with these programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Mrs. Onright. Great. Chairman Nelson and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity today to discuss how NASA is implementing the Authorization Act under the continuing resolution, otherwise known as the CR. NASA, most importantly, due to the enactment of the Act, NASA has clear direction and has begun to move forward, and we're very excited and committed to the path that we're on. NASA appreciates the significant effort that advanced this bipartisan legislation, particularly efforts by the leadership and members of this committee. There are still details that the final appropriations outcome will provide, but broad outlines are now clear and law, and that makes the road ahead much easier and clearer. And this is a time of excellent opportunity for NASA to shape the promising future for the nation's space program. There's also no doubt that this year has been challenging to the NASA workforce, both the civil service and contractors. They put in long hours planning new missions for which funding was uncertain, and while at the same time continuing to work on missions for which the future was uncertain. And still, NASA's workforce rose to the challenge. They always do, and it is to be commended for the outstanding accomplishments over this year. Moreover, now with the Authorization Act, the workforce can look forward to many more accomplishments yet to come. For the immediate future, as with other federal agencies, NASA is operating under a CR, which can be a complex juggling act. First, we must read the Authorization Act and the CR in concert wherever possible. For example, NASA program funding levels below the account level are generally controlled by the Authorization Act. Second, NASA must take heed of the pending appropriations bills, because when the final appropriation is adopted, NASA must apply its constraints and funding levels back to the beginning of throughout the entire fiscal year. And finally, there are specific restrictions in the CR, which we've already discussed. In particular, the CR continues any restrictions that were present in last year's appropriation, including in NASA's case, the prohibition on termination of components of the Constellation program. Moreover, the CR requires that work not begin on new starts, which is a legal term of art about which GAO has given us guidance in their May report. And using that guidance, we have been working through what is and is not a new start, and we have not yet found anything in the Authorization Act that on which we cannot proceed, but we're not done with our analysis. It is unfortunately lengthy analysis, and we're working the issue daily. However, there are some areas in which we can clearly proceed. For example, planning efforts for the heavy lift and multipurpose crew vehicle activities, both authorized in the Act, are proceeding and are assessing the transition from the Constellation efforts to the new programs. Moreover, on November 8th, NASA announced the results of a broad agency announcement under which NASA selected 13 companies to conduct studies on various heavy lift technologies. These studies are focused on achieving affordability, operability, reliability, and commonality at the system and subsystem levels with multiple users, including other government, commercial, science, and international partners. Further, although requirements for the multipurpose crew vehicle have not yet been fully vetted, NASA expects this vehicle to be based on the existing Orion work. The ground test article for Orion will be completed within the coming months, which is very exciting, and in early 2011, the GTA will be shipped to Denver for performance testing that will help validate the cabin design. Additional effects of the CR on NASA's programs are detailed in my written statement, but for now, Chairman Nelson and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. NASA is at the beginning of a path that will create opportunities and discoveries for generations, and so like you, NASA is very eager to get started on implementing the Act. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchinson, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting us here today to discuss issues NASA faces as it implements the direction outlined in the Authorization Act of 2010. Today we will be briefly discussing how the continuing resolution continues restrictions in NASA's fiscal year 2010 appropriations and what steps NASA should take to increase the likelihood of success as it implements its new direction. As you know, I am accompanied by Susan Poling, Managing Associate General Counsel at GAO, who can answer questions related to the appropriations restrictions. As you know, NASA's fiscal year 2010 appropriations contain a restriction prohibiting NASA from terminating any program, project, or activity, that is PPAs, of the Constellation program, or creating new ones until provided for in a subsequent Appropriations Act. These restrictions remain in place today because NASA is operating under a continuing resolution. Continuing resolutions are temporary appropriations acts that NASA enacts to keep existing programs functioning after the expiration of previous budget activity. What this means for NASA's implementation of the Authorization Act is that NASA must carry out the Authorization Act, but without terminating or eliminating any PPA of the Constellation program and without creating or initiating new ones. Our opinions from earlier this year may offer NASA some guidance as it moves forward. We found that NASA did not violate the prohibition when it convened study teams to conduct planning activities. Agencies may conduct planning activities as part of the budget process, and NASA's planning activities earlier this year did not create a new PPA. NASA also continued to obligate funds to all the existing PPAs of the Constellation program. As long as NASA did not improperly create or terminate a PPA, NASA has discretion in how it carries out the Constellation program consistent with the Congress's statutory direction. Shifts in priority do not in and of themselves constitute the termination or elimination of a PPA. With regard to our perspectives on steps NASA needs to take to increase the likelihood of success as it implements the authorization, I would like to highlight recommendations related to how NASA manages its largest investments. Recently, it's been reported that the James Webb Telescope may now cost $6.5 billion or more, while its baseline estimate set just 2 years ago was about $5 billion. Our studies have highlighted similar cases of large cost and schedule overruns in recent years, for example, with Mars Science Lab, the Glory mission, and the National Preparatory Project. Further, more than a decade of studies have consistently pointed to weaknesses in cost estimating, contractor oversight, funding stability, management reserves, as well as technology and design problems that manifest late in the acquisition process. Thus, we would like to see NASA commit to the following key practices. First, base decisions to move programs forward on tangible knowledge about requirements and resources. NASA's policies have incorporated many of the best practices GAO has advocated, but we still don't always see these policies translate into decisions. Some of the most expensive efforts are allowed to proceed into more complex phases of development, while there's still considerable unknowns about requirements, time needed to execute programs, cost, available funding, and available technology. Second, NASA needs to prioritize investments so projects can be fully funded and it is clear where projects stand in relation to the overall portfolio. When funding profiles do not match up with the real needs of projects like James Webb or Constellation, higher-risk development paths often become the only way to keep projects alive. Moreover, projects within NASA are often not prioritized until a large cost overrun is discovered and good programs are left to pay for poor performers. Third, NASA still needs to instill greater accountability. The recent study on James Webb found that lines of authority and accountability are not clear and that ongoing regular independent assessment and oversight processes at the agency are missing. Our view is that until accountability is instilled, NASA will struggle in its implementation of the good practices it has embraced in recent years. I would like to note that aspects of the practices detailed in our written statement are reflected in the authorization for the new Space Launch System. We would like to see such measures extend across the acquisition portfolio. At the same time, it is important that Congress enable NASA to be realistic about what it can do and cannot do under the direction of the authorization, and to support and assist the agency as it makes difficult trade-off decisions between resources, that is time and money, and requirements. This concludes our opening statement, and Susan and I are happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank all of you for your testimony and thank all of you for your public service. Dr. Holdren, do you intend to follow the law in the NASA authorization bill?
Absolutely. We are committed to following the law. The President signed it. The Congress passed it. We will follow it, and we will execute it and implement it to the best of our ability.
Dr. Robinson, you as the Chief Financial Officer, are you intending to follow the law?
Most definitely.
I want to ask you about a statement that you made on page 4 of your testimony that would indicate otherwise. In speaking about the implementation, the following guidance to the Constellation program at the top of page 4, you note in the execution under the existing appropriations of the law, the following priorities have been in place since the June replan are being used. And you go on to list avoid termination of prime contracts, continued development of critical capabilities. And then you list prioritize investments that support the initiatives under the 2011 President's budget request and the NASA Authorization Act of 2010. The President's budget request is history. The law is now the authorization bill. So are you suggesting in this testimony that you intend to follow the President's budget request instead of the law?
No, not at all. To us, the end is very important. What we were trying to convey there is there are some elements in the Authorization Act which were discussed and presented in the budget. And so to the extent that there was guidance there and parameters, we wanted to make sure that the program was looking at those. Because that's the basics of budgeting, right, is that we present a proposal, and if you say yes, then you expect us to follow our proposal. And that's all we're saying there.
The reason I bring this up is exactly what Senator Vitter had raised in his comments, that there have been plenty of messages that have been sent to the overseers, which is this committee, that certain elements of NASA and other parts of the administration intend to follow their own directions instead of the law. And as a matter of fact, you would lend to that by this statement. So I'm glad that you clarified that for the record. Dr. Holdren, how would you characterize the administration's support for the entire Authorization Act?
We support it wholly, sir. Again, you passed it. The President signed it. It is the law of the land. We intend to implement it. We support it. We are looking forward to working with this committee and the rest of the Congress in getting that done. We're looking forward to the additional guidance and the resources that will come with appropriations that will make it easier to move forward rapidly with all of the elements of the Authorization Act. But we support it fully.
What direction have you, as the science advisor to the President, given to the agency to assure what you just said, the full, faithful, and timely implementation?
I have spoken with Administrator Bolden, with Deputy Administrator Garver, with the CFO, the Honorable Beth Robinson, who's here with me, and we have had no trouble coming to complete agreement that NASA is in full support of the law that has been passed and signed and will implement it. We are in complete agreement on that. I didn't need to offer any particular further guidance because that was already NASA's position. But I've been very clear it's the President's position. I've been assured that it's NASA's position.
As you know, the President's initial proposal, as referenced by Dr. Robinson in her statement on page 4, had, as Senator Hutchinson had said, had met with a great deal of resistance in some of the elements. I think part of it was, in some cases, a poor choice of words. The President's budget request, for example, utilizing the word cancel the Constellation program instead of using the word redirect the Constellation program, and it gave perceptions and impressions that did not reflect the President's true intention about a manned space program. And Yet since then, we have seen that some people, whether it be that or it be the question of the appropriations on the commercial crew program, whatever it was, that some people feel strongly that the President's proposal was the only way to go. I think you have sufficiently given the authority as the President's science advisor what this committee needs. Now, in stating that the President's signature on the law is now the President's proposal, and that's what we're going to proceed with. Dr. Robinson, do you concur with what Dr. Holdren said?
Definitely. We are very committed to moving forward on all aspects of the law. From our perspective, we are doing that. I regret if there have been any messages to the contrary, because we're very excited at NASA about this new path and implementing it as fast as we can.
Last June, a national space policy was articulated. It's broader. It has goals and objectives. What do you think about, Dr. Holdren, is the Authorization Act that is now signed into law, is it the new national space policy?
Well, Senator, it is the authorization for NASA. It is the law, and we will follow it. As far as I can see, it is consistent with the national space policy, which also, however, addresses some additional issues related, for example, to national security and homeland security and the role of space in that domain, issues that are not specifically addressed in the Authorization Act. I think these two documents coexist nicely.
Senator Hutchinson.
Thank you. Let me say I'm very pleased to hear both of you and being very clear and very supportive, and that's what we all are looking for to go forward. Let me ask Dr. Robinson, there is a specific part of the law which I will read, Section 101 of the law that passed this year, states, after providing an authorized funding level for the space operations line, of which $1,609,700,000 shall be for the space shuttle to support space shuttle flight operations and related activities. Further, in Section 503 of the same law, it states the administrator shall fly the Launch on Need shuttle mission currently designated in the Shuttle Flight Manifest dated February 28, 2010. Finally, in Section 503, it says, amounts authorized to be appropriated by Section 101 shall be available for the mission authorized by Paragraph 1. So, given that precise language, is it your understanding, Dr. Robinson, that the law requires NASA to conduct that mission subject, obviously, to safety certifications and that type of requirement?
Mm-hmm. The law definitely does. The only caveat that I would put forth is that we still don't have the final appropriations, so we don't know if we have the money to carry it out. But it is NASA's complete intention to fly the third flight.
But if we pass a long-term CR, we're not sure yet if it will be a short-term, long-term CR, but if there is the long-term CR, and it would provide, as the chairman has stated earlier, 18.7 at least billion, wouldn't that cover, given the priorities of the bill, that capability to go forward, which we will know in the next few weeks? I mean, time is running out.
Right. No, definitely. If we were operating on long-term CR, we would have enough funding to fly the third flight.
Thank you, because, of course, the reason that we were so specific is that we are looking for the reports now on the needs of the station and trying to forecast any equipment, any kind of emergency capability that we might need to keep the station operative to fulfill the investment that we've made in it for the research. So it is essential that we have that report before we are able to know what is needed in the last shuttles, because that will be our last chance. Now, I would ask Dr. Holdren, as well as you, Dr. Robinson, if we are all on the same wavelength here, that we've got to get the report. And what we're hearing is that there might be an interim report on the President's 2012 budget request. But we need to have a full steam ahead effort to determine what is going to be needed for the space station, because we're moving up on the last 2 shuttles next year. So could I hear from both of you on your view of that priority, the reports?
Go ahead. Oh, we fully agree with you, and the reports are on track. And I do know this is also an issue, the manifest, that Space Operations Mission Director works consistently, and so we fully expect to have those reports up on time.
Yeah, I would just add, I completely agree with what the CFO has just said. Certainly, the future of the space station and how we manage that and how we provide for it is one of those areas where the President's initial proposal and the bill that is now law, the Authorization Act, are in complete agreement. We're completely with you.
Well, I am pleased that the President does focus on the need to use the station for its purpose and has extended its capability, or the hopefully the use of it beyond the original hope that we had, because of course there's been such a lag time in the development of the next crew return vehicle, and so we have to deal with that. But I think that going forward on a quicker timeline than was in the President's for the next vehicle, so that we know we have that capability, hopefully quicker, is something that we've got to all work together to do. Let me ask this on the holding back of funds that might be made available to begin the development for the Space Launch System and the multipurpose crew vehicle. Obviously, in our bill, the highest priority is in the Exploration Systems Mission Directorate, ahead of things like space technology initiatives, which the law clearly states are activities expected to be undertaken in later years. Can you give our committee assurances that the congressional intent to aggressively pursue immediate initiation of the Space Launch System and crew exploration vehicle development activities will be followed? Both of you, Dr. Holdren.
Senator, we are going to follow the law. I can't emphasize that enough. It is the law. We are going to follow it.
And I'd further say we've already begun to those efforts, the planning and design efforts.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Vitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to this issue of the restrictive language in the continuing resolution from the 2010 Appropriations Act, because I think if we really want to solve that problem, it's easily solved. I think the almost certain next step in terms of funding is going to be another CR for some length of time. As the chairman indicated, that would put NASA funding extremely close to what's outlined in our new Authorization Act. Less than 2% difference. In the grand scheme of things, that difference is trivial. So therefore, for that next step, it seems to me it should be easy to all agree on clarifying language saying that anything from that 2010 Appropriation Act inconsistent with the new 2010 Authorization Act will have no force and effect. Given the trivial fund, except the overall funding level, which shouldn't be a big deal to come down $300 million out of however many billion. Given that the Authorization Act passed unanimously in the Senate and by a 3/4 vote in the House, it shouldn't be a big hurdle to insert that language in a new CR. Maybe I'm missing something, but if we're really trying to accomplish that, it should be a no-brainer. Have you developed language to accomplish that for the new CR? And have you told congressional leaders that the President absolutely wants that language included?
We have developed that language. We've been working with the staff on the authorization committees and appropriations committees. As you pointed out, it's a relatively simple matter in terms of legislative language, and we do fully support it at NASA.
And have, as administration policy, have you said the President absolutely wants this language included so that we can fully, without any restriction, accomplish the new Authorization Act?
I can't say for sure to whom that message has been communicated up until now, because legislative affairs is not something I can keep track of to that detail. But certainly that message will be communicated if it has not already been communicated to the key folks.
Okay. Can you put that message in writing, and can I get a copy?
Sure.
And can I get a copy of your drafted language that you think will do the trick?
Sure.
Okay, great. I'm a recovering lawyer, so that's dangerous. It seems to me it should be pretty simple, something like no language in the FY 2010 NASA Appropriations Act inconsistent with the NASA Authorization Act of 2010, except the overall NASA funding level shall continue to have force and effect. Something like that. Maybe that's not the perfect language, but something like that. Do you have any reaction to the general notion?
That sounds like it would work. I think the draft that we have is more forward-looking, basically saying anything that's in the authorization that NASA is allowed to do, and we also remove the specific restrictions. So
okay.
That's a different approach. Same idea.
Okay. Well, again, if you all could send me, and I'm sure the others would like to see it, both the draft language and the letter to appropriate leadership committee chairman stating that it's the administration's position that this really needs to be included. Thank you. And I'd like to ask the folks from GAO if they have a reaction to that solution to the problem that your report highlights.
I think it is, can you hear me? I think it is important that there be an anomaly put into any continuing resolution so that there is no question that NASA can move forward. And the form that takes, as you just discussed, there are probably many forms that it could take. You might also want to include in it that the no new starts provision of the continuing resolution also wouldn't apply.
I mean, you can do it different ways, but my language would clearly cancel that out because that is inconsistent with the Authorization Act.
Perhaps, but you referenced it back to the 2010 appropriations, which has its own set of restrictions. The continuing resolution has a different set of restrictions.
Okay, good point. So it would have to include any language in the CR.
I think so, yes.
That's inconsistent, would not have force and effect.
Yeah, you want to relate it back to
Right.
both acts and to the amendment that was passed in late July that also had to do with termination of contracts.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to focus on this, but let me underscore quickly. I think we're going to have another CR. As the chairman said, that funding level for the next fiscal year will be right about at where it is in the authorization bill. So this should be a simple task if we really all want to accomplish it. And so the proof will be in the pudding if it gets done. And so I look forward to getting that done in the next CR. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Senator Bitter, it's actually even closer. I was rounding it, the $300 million difference. It's actually a difference of $276 million for the funding level in last year's 2010 appropriations was 18.724. Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by thanking you for working with me and others on another piece, I think critical piece of NASA's program, the commercial development side and then the private sector side. And I was happy to hear in Dr. Holdren's comments a recommitment to that part of the program. And I wanted to make a couple of quick comments and then ask a reflection from Dr. Holdren and Ms. Robinson. It appears that the commercial spacecraft side of the House seems to have accomplished quite a few milestones, for basically a fairly small investment of $50 million so far in the commercial crew development. And I was pleased to see today, for example, on a related, but something I think will dominate, I hope, all of our efforts going forward, the President's Deficit Commission final report, which in the preliminary report had said perhaps this investment in the commercial side of the house from the public dollars should not be included, that part was actually dropped out. So I think the Deficit Commission concurred with those of us who believe that the commercial side, both in terms of a viable new worldwide industry for America to take a lead in, and for more public-private partnerships with NASA is going to be a critical part of our space future. And I just want to, again, in recognizing that the chairman helped build this into the 10 authorization, I would just like to get a couple of quick comments from Dr. Holdren or Ms. Robinson on that subject.
Well, first of all, let me join you, Senator Warner, in welcoming the fact that the Deficit Commission dropped from their report that was just released the proposition that this would not have been a good investment. We think it's a terrific investment. We think we're going to get great value for the money invested in terms of the future of a commercial space industry and the jobs and opportunities that will provide. And as I noted in my testimony, meeting at the same time a critical national need. So we are grateful that this element is in the authorization bill. We're grateful that the Deficit Commission did not put a bullseye on it, and we're very optimistic about progress in that domain. As you probably know, the SpaceX launch of Falcon 9 with the Dragon spacecraft is now scheduled for December 7th. This will be the first time that a commercial craft of this has actually re-entered, and we're very excited about it. We think that the industry has terrific prospects, and I agree with you that it has made a substantial amount of progress so far with rather modest resources. We're going to see a lot more progress.
You also pointed to the commercial crew development effort that was begun last year, and I also just wanted to point out that the Authorization Act encouraged us to continue that effort in 2001, and we have done that. We're going out with another round to seek another round of proposals. And so, because we do think tremendous things came of that effort, and we hope it will continuing this year.
Let me raise one other issue with my remaining time. And a little off subject, but one, and candidly not an area that is a huge piece of the NASA budget, but that is the NASA Aeronautics program. I'm blessed to have a large piece of that in my state, at NASA Langley. But I would like a comment from you all that it seems to me that one of the real growth areas, again, from an industry-wide standpoint, is the development of a more fuel-efficient aeronautics program worldwide. And there's been I think no one sees a diminishment of the amount of air traffic. Obviously, on other parts of this committee, we've looked at the enormous needs we have to upgrade our aviation control system with NextGen, but actually redesigning 21st century airplanes in a more fuel-efficient way, to my mind, is one of the great next frontiers. I'd like either one of you to make a brief comment on how you see the NASA Aeronautics program. We saw a small increase in the authorization in FY10, but what kind of potential do you see for growth in that field?
Well, first of all, I can only agree that there is tremendous potential in the domain of more fuel-efficient aircraft and the development of those. And there's also tremendous potential, as you've noted, in upgrading our national air traffic control system to a 21st century standard. NASA's role in advancing these goals is an important one, and we intend to pursue it vigorously.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just add that this is an area that I think there is yet to be a hub, whether this will be America leading the way, or Europe or elsewhere on the development of next generation aeronautics and aviation, I think is an open question. And I hope in this coming year we'll get a chance to look at this issue more deeply and make sure that America takes an appropriate leadership role in this field.
And Senator Warner, you might note that there was a huge plus-up in the aeronautics part of this budget, some $422 million, which was a substantial percentage increase for the aeronautics. And, of course, it all plays into the skies of the future, all the needs on upgrades that we're seeing there in the FAA.
Great leadership by the chairman.
And Senator Hudson.
Ranking member.
My colleague, Senator Lemieux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your public service. As I know you know from my colleague from Florida, these issues of NASA are very important to our state. And it's a very emotional issue because where America first reached for the stars was from Florida. And we have this huge investment in our communities in the Space Coast. And we have a lot of folks now who are worried about losing their jobs and who will be losing their jobs in an area that's already economically depressed. When I first came to the United States Senate and learned sort of the process, it gave me a lot of consternation about where we are with manned space travel. And it was described that the Constellation program was vision without funding. And it occurred to me that the administration's original proposal was funding without vision. But we came to a consensus on this committee, and with the good work of the people on this committee, we came to this authorization bill. It's not my first choice. I would have liked more. But it was a good consensus-building product, I think. Now, I've read, Madam CFO, I've been reading your statement. And I'm concerned that Congress has gotten in the way of you implementing this bill. You have made very positive statements today, all of you, about you are going forward, it's the law of the land, and you support it. But in your testimony on page 2, specifically in points 4 and 5 goes over to page 3, you talk about the fact that because an appropriations bill has not been passed, that you are continuing to apply the previous appropriations bill. And I want you to tell us, because of the failure of Congress to act, what have you not been able to do to move forward on the authorization bill that was passed and signed by the President?
There are a number of ways to look at it. One is that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And there's uncertainty about what our legal basis is to move forward with specific authorized efforts, and we're working through that. And it's without clarity, it's a long task to be able to buttress that the argument that we can move forward. Also, the funding levels. So we've seen in the various acts, we've seen different funding levels, and so there is uncertainty around that. And then also, of course, whether or not there'll be reductions taken further from those bills or even further from in a full year CR. And so in that kind of environment, it's just very difficult to put your foot firmly on the path and start walking because you're still trying to make sure that you're going in the that you'll have the resources to get there. And so it's mainly that it puts a damper on the system from being able to move forward quickly.
Can you give us some examples of things that you can't do because the funding is in question?
Well, we have moved forward in select areas. The real issue is not whether or not a specific activity we can pursue. It's how much we can pursue it. For example, will we get the funding at a specific level for heavy lift? What will that funding level be? You'll have a different program if you start out at a different funding level in the first year and thereabouts. And so it's not a specific activity. It's more you just can't finalize your plans until you have the overall funding and other terms and conditions set so that you can move forward.
Dr. Holdren, can you speak to this topic?
Well, I guess I can't speak to it as accurately or with as much information as CFO Robinson can do. I'm the Science and Technology Advisor. I can't really speak to the details of the constraints of existing legislation and lack of appropriations on exactly what NASA does. I think that expertise resides both to my right and to my left.
Well, it's my hope that this will get resolved, and the language that Senator Vitter proposed or others have suggested can get done. It seems time and time again this Congress's dysfunctionality and failure to move on things is causing paralysis out in the world. And for my colleague from Florida and I, this is a big issue because this isn't just an abstract issue, and it's not just manned space flight, which is an essential part of being exceptional in this country, all important things, but it's people's lives. And there's an article today from the Orlando Sentinel about NASA's human space flight program is adrift. And they're concerned, there's all this uncertainty. What's it going to mean for the people of our state? So working with Senator Vitter, with the chairman, with our ranking member and others to get this done, helping us get this done, I think is very important. So I appreciate your statements today that you will do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding the hearing and the witnesses for being here and their input on these important issues. I want to bring up the issue of solar electronic propulsion demonstration with you, Ms. Robinson, if you could. The NASA Reauthorization Act calls for a balance between human spaceflight using and building upon existing capabilities and then investing in new capabilities. And one such technology is solar electronic propulsion. So what is the current status of the research on that, and how much is NASA budgeting for that demonstration in the, the next 5-year time window, 11 to 15?
Right. Well, I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of how much we're spending now and how much we've carved out in the future lines. Again, given the uncertainty that we have, some of the lines that would support solar electric propulsion are the ones that are most in question. But NASA is very excited about that technology and is pursuing it in a number of laboratories and certainly in a concerted research effort. And so we that was one of the technologies that we want to bring forward and bring to a higher technology readiness level, and so that we can start demonstrating its effects.
Well, it obviously factors into the Human Exploration Framework Team for space missions. So,
right.
I'll look for. I guess a budget number is what we're really after for FY11 to FY15.
Yeah. We'll do that for the record. Yeah.
Okay, great. Another thing that is of lots of interest, I think, across the country is the site selection process for the retired shuttles. And obviously the NASA Authorization Act of 2010 stated that these space orbiters shall be available and located for display and maintenance through a competitive process. And could you describe for the committee what that competitive procedure process is and what's being undertaken?
Right. Well, the process that we have at NASA, and it'll be the administrator's decision where the orbiters go. We've put out several requests for information. We've been contacted. It's been wonderful. We've been contacted by hundreds of potential applicants, and we've been looking. The team, which I'm not on, but the team has been looking through and evaluating those proposals from potential museums and sites as to some of the key factors that the authorization bill and other places have stressed for us in terms of how many students can see it. Do people around the country have access to them? And so that evaluation is ongoing.
When you say a team, is that a site selection committee?
No, it's just a team that's looking at the information and advising the administrator.
And so what will the administrator make his decision on?
He'll make his decision based on several criteria that have been set forth and talked about in the request for information. And I'll have to get those for you for the record. I can't list them all.
And is there going to be geographic diversity as part of the consideration?
That's part of the consideration, yes.
Okay. Will the White House be involved?
We'll have to get back to you for the record. I'm not involved in the process. I don't believe they are. It's the administrator's decision.
Well, I think there's a lot of different people who are very interested in this, and I think the RFI was stipulated that 28 million was required to be interested, and anyway, I think there's lots of different changing things here, and I think what people are looking for is a process that people really understand, that it's transparent, that people know what the requirements are, and if the administrator is going to make the decision, based on what is the administrator going to make the decision. So if it's not an official RFP with a site selection process and it's just advice, a little more framework. Obviously, communities like ours have already built an entire infrastructure around the public access to our space and flying history, and obviously would like to build on that further, but certainly want to understand that the western part of the United States is not going to be overlooked in the assets that it's brought as part of this history. And so anyway, just is NASA considering the Smithsonian for one of these sites?
As regards to the Smithsonian has the right of first refusal. And
why do they have the
why? Because they're the I don't actually know the term of art, but they're the nation's what? It's an MOU. It's a memorandum of understanding with them, and we have the orbiters are one class of NASA artifacts that we've interacted with the Smithsonian. I think if you go to the Air and Space Museum, you see lots of NASA hardware, and so we have an ongoing MOU with them.
Are they required to pay the $28 million?
Yes. At this point, yes.
Okay.
NASA doesn't have the funds to cover those transportation and making the orbiters ready for museum and public exposure.
Okay. Well, I will look forward to more specifics about how the administrator is going to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. Dr. Robinson, you say in your testimony that, quote, to best manage workforce impacts, the shuttle program needs to confirm approval to add the third shuttle flight, STS-135 mission, by December 2010, end of quote.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're at December the 1st today. And given the administration's emphasis on that we want to supply and equip the International Space Station, can you tell me where NASA is in the approval process for that third shuttle flight?
Well, as I said, we have every intention of flying that flight. with the continuing resolutions, we still have some uncertainty about the ultimate funding level, and we're trying to quantify what it means to hedge our bets, in other words, for in case there's a drastic change in funding level. But I think we have every intention of moving forward on that.
You concur, Dr. Holdren?
I do. The only challenge would be, as Ms. Robinson has just indicated, if there were a funding level drastically different than the one we've been talking about here, that would clearly pose challenges. But it's, as we've stated here already, we're committed to fly it, and with the funding levels that have been discussed here, we will certainly be able to do so.
Back to the issue of implementing the law. You all in NASA already have a general counsel opinion on implementing two parts of the authorization law. One, space technology, and two, commercial crew. And you have a legal opinion that says that you can pursue that. The question is, why don't we have a legal opinion on pursuing the part of the new authorization law on the space launch system, which is the heavy lift vehicle, and the multi-purpose vehicle, which is the crew capsule?
Well, as I referred several times here, it is a lengthy thing to generate these opinions. We actually have a third now. We have a third for the ISS and NGO, the non-governmental organization that will be doing the research, which was authorized in the Act. So they've cleared that too. And I think the issue of priority was which program needed clarity first. And space technology was driven primarily by the cycle for graduate students, that they wanted to be able to tell potential graduate students that there would be funding available for that graduate program. And so we, I already know that they're working on the one for heavy lift and the multipurpose crew vehicle. The other thing about those activities is that they've been able to go forward with a whole host of things that are just in line with the setting priorities among the constellation activities, and haven't really needed any buttressing to be able to make progress. And that's the only reason that they were further down in the list.
Do you know when we might expect those legal opinions to be produced on those two items?
I don't know exactly when, but I know they're working them as we speak.
Dr. Holdren, I want to come back to this theme of consensus building. The perception of the President's position did not, in this senator's opinion, do justice to the President in the way that the budget was rolled out on the President's budget for NASA a couple of years ago. And in order to avoid the disaster of that perception in that budget rollout, can you express to this committee the intent of collaboration between the Congress and the administration and the agency to be improved as we are now looking to next February in the rollout of the next President's budget, which is the 2012 budget request?
The short answer, Senator, is yes. The slightly longer answer in support of that is that I think we are in a much better position now with the Authorization Act passed and signed by the President, giving direction. This provides a basis for our consultations and collaboration going forward, which I think will be very beneficial and it's certainly our intention to collaborate and cooperate with this committee and others in the Congress as we move toward an FY 2012 budget proposal.
So is the new law being incorporated into the fiscal year 2012 planning process of the budget?
Of course it is. It has to be. There is no way that we could meaningfully think about the 2012 budget without taking into account the guidance of that legislation, which is now law.
And in the spirit of collaboration, of which there has been some paucity in the past, and I refer back to specifically the previous budget, are you going to seek, and by the way, the paucity is not directed at you personally, but you are the science advisor, and so my question is, will you seek congressional input before the rollout of that budget in February?
Well, sir, the answer is yes, and as you will recall, even in the circumstance of the 2011 budget, you and I met on a number of occasions to discuss the priorities and the issues there. I met with Senator Vitter on one occasion to discuss issues around the space program and the budgets going forward. So I wouldn't quite agree that there may have been a paucity in the sense that it was not sufficient, but there was consultation before, and there will be more consultation going forward.
Well, it was certainly insufficient in the rollout of the budget with the use of the words cancel the Constellation program, because that wasn't the intent that the President was trying to convey. And that's why I keep harping on the issue of collaboration.
We will do better this time.
Senator Hutchinson.
Could I be added to your list of people with whom you consult?
Yes, I did also consult with Senator Hutchinson. That's true. I apologize for omitting that.
All right. I think the point is that we would like to all be on the same page, because it'll just be more expedited if we are. And I think you all have been forthcoming, and I appreciate it very much. And just know that if we can all agree on language and all put our collective weight behind getting it into the CR so that we can move forward, we need the design to be done so that we can fully fund that, because it is our highest priority in order to shorten the gap that we would have to depend on Russia to get our people into the space station, and secondly, to fully utilize the space station. So I think that going forward, we just have to collaborate and right away on the CR language that would satisfy all of the potential legal hurdles to going full force toward the design of the next launch and vehicle with the crew capsule.
I agree.
Thank you.
Senator Vitter.
Yeah, just as a quick follow-up to something the chairman mentioned, Ms. Robinson, the three opinions that you have, were those three activities all activities included in the President's budget proposal and submission plan?
Two of them definitely were. The commercial crew one was not actually, they were cleared to do a different activity than what was proposed in the President's budget. It was the same, it wasn't the full up crew activity that was proposed there.
But he certainly had a lot of commercial activity in the budget that was similar, consistent.
Yes.
Well, my point is simply this. You have three opinions. They're all basically about activity that the President wanted as reflected by his budget submission. You have no opinions yet about the changes Congress made. That's sort of a perfect example of the sort of thing to date that has us skeptical and concerned. And that's what's really needs to change so that we come together around what's law and move forward aggressively around every aspect, not just certain favored aspects about what's law. And I think this CR language discussion is very useful. First of all, it's the next step in terms of what we all need to accomplish. Secondly, I think it'll be a very useful test. I mean, if the administration wants that to happen, it'll happen. If the administration isn't committed to really coming together and aggressively implementing the new authorization language, it won't happen. So I consider it an immediate and useful test because it should not be difficult, particularly considering the President's leverage in any CR discussion should not be difficult to accomplish. So I'm certainly hopeful it'll happen. We'll see. Thank you.
Don't worry, Ms. Chaplain. We're going to get to you. Dr. Robinson, if we are under a CR at the 2010 funding level, which was the 18.724 level, what recommendations would you provide to the administrator of NASA for the necessary $276 million funding reduction from what was authorized in the NASA bill, which is $19 billion?
Well, the administrator has already considered that, and he decided that the best place to take that money would be the 21st Century Launch Initiative for 2011. The fact that we're already a quarter in, the fact that the bulk of that money is being spent on things like construction and things like that, we thought that it would be difficult at this point, once we get clearance, to actually obligate all that money, and so he wanted to take the reduction there with the thought that we would make it up later.
Even though some of those projects are already underway?
No, some of the projects are definitely underway, but for the full $429 million program, that's all of that is not planned and underway.
By that is the implication of your answer that you would pick up that full funding for the 21st Century Launch Center in fiscal year 2012, starting in October of 2011?
Right. The commitment to that initiative is, I believe, $1.9 billion over 5 years. And so we would rephase it. We would look and see when we needed to obligate money for the various projects. But that would be our intent if NASA is blessed with having the funding levels continue in the out years.
Well, I want to, if you would pass on to the administrator, that I'd like to know the specifics of that. One of the President's major goals that he stated in the speech down at the Kennedy Space Center is that in order to be able to have the NASA of the future, you've got to modernize the facilities that, in fact, are used to launch the space vehicles. Mm-hmm. And that we can't lose any time on. So I want to see the implementation of what the administrator would be proposing there. Dr. Robinson, how would the agency prioritize the funding cuts if they are more dramatic?
Well, I think we will look to the Congress and to provide us guidance on how to do that. For example, the one level that's talked about is the 2008 funding level, which for NASA was about $17.4 billion, a $1.6 billion cut from the numbers that we've talked about. We're already a quarter into the fiscal year, basically, and so it's even more of a magnitude cut for the remainder of the year. And we would have to look very hard at places where we could instigate those kinds of savings on that kind of timetable. It would be a truly drastic situation at that point. And we would be looking to be able to shed expenses wherever we could. But most of our programs are long-term. Most of them have long-term contracts, and so we would be limited in many different areas to implementing a cut that quickly.
You've heard this recent Cassani report, and Dr. Holdren, I'll ask this to you as well. It documents the major financial problems with the James Webb Space Telescope. It's going to cost more money, and it's going to add another year to the development on a schedule for a launch somewhere around 2014. So how is NASA responding to the reports, and will the funds from other programs have to be shifted in to allow the telescope to move forward in a timely manner? Dr. Holdren?
Well, I would start by saying that I was certainly very disappointed to read the findings of the Cassani report indicating the dimension of the problems with the James Webb. We think the James Webb is a very important component of our ability to understand the universe going forward. It's a very important successor to the Hubble. And given its importance and given the difficulty that we now understand that program is in, I can assure you that a very hard look is being taken in NASA at how those challenges are going to be addressed and ameliorated. It's possible that CFO Robinson can add something about that process that's going on, but I know from my own direct interactions with Administrator Bolden that this is now a very serious focus of his attention.
I wanted to add to that, too, that I think when we all read the Cassani report, we were heartened to see that the program is making its technical milestones. But from a budgeting and planning and a lot of the work that we've done with GAO, it simply had not followed those. And it was somewhat shocking, actually. It just had not followed the normal NASA procedures. And so we are taking a look at that. The Cassani report gave us a parametric look, a broad scale look at the money that was going to be needed. They were looking at the quickest route to get there, which would involve changes this year. Of course, we're already a quarter into this year, and we're unlikely to be able to implement increased funding this year to the level that Cassani was recommending earlier. And so we're doing a bottoms-up analysis, trying to get a more detailed cost estimate, looking at the phasing in the budget for that program, and we'll be presenting more details in the 2012 budget.
If the newspaper accounts are accurate that I've read, this could be a hit of something like $200 million in 1 year in order to make up for the deficiencies in the telescope project. Mm-hmm. Is it the position of the CFO that the CFO will recommend to the administrator a place to take that $200 million if that's the administrator's decision?
The way we do this is at NASA is a very collaborative effort. The Science Mission Directorate, which owns JW and a whole host of other programs, will be looking hard at that funding profile. The Cassani report was about $200 million a year, so that's in line with what they said. And we'll just have to do an analysis throughout the entire budget of where to make those kinds of changes.
Ms. Chaplain, could you comment on behalf of GAO on this Cassani report?
We were very disappointed to see the findings of the report. In my own mind, it kind of has to re-baseline my thinking about the improvements NASA's been making, because we've been hearing for several years now that we have a plan, we're trying to incorporate best practices, we're trying to reflect them where we can, and James Webb was actually one program where you did see best practices reflected in the technology development portion of it. But then to have this kind of news come out so late in the game after so much has been spent is very disconcerting and disappointing. I think NASA really needs to pay attention to the report and really examine the accountability processes it has, the oversight processes it has, to make sure they're the most effective as possible.
And this was at the same time that NASA got some good news that it achieved a qualified opinion from the auditors for the first time since 2002. So, Ms. Chaplain, what issues does NASA need to address in order to continue this forward progress?
I think NASA is making good progress on the financial statement side of things and the accounting side of things. I think where progress really needs to be made is translating the good practices that are embedded in their policies and procedures into real decisions and getting more insight into programs early in their development. In the case of James Webb, we don't have official cost estimates or a lot of information until they've been in development for quite a long time, years maybe. So the more we could have some insight up front to see if programs are really being set up for success, and we have more indicators about whether management reserves are sufficient or not, and have more insight into things like cost estimates, the better off everybody will be, because we can see what kind of path a program is headed down. And so it is a matter of gaining more insight up front and also getting more accountability and attention to actually implementing the policies that are in paper.
Your written statement, Ms. Chaplain, puts emphasis on the design stability prior to proceeding. The new law adopts a proven heritage approach to development of the new launch system, which requires maximum use of design elements with a large body of experience and knowledge behind them. Do you think that if the law is implemented by NASA in this way, that it's going to contribute to an increased chance for a successful space launch system development?
I think there were a lot of good practices reflected in the authorization, including the emphasis on evolutionary development. That way, you're putting off some of the more challenging and costly aspects till later on, relying on heritage, as you said, encouraging earlier design knowledge than would normally be attained, and also scaling requirements to a minimum and being flexible. That said, I still have concerns when I see any effort like this. There's a tendency across NASA and, as you know, the Air Force to consistently underestimate the use or overestimate how much heritage technology you can actually use in your next project. So while it seems like we can use a lot of the stuff that's already around, we don't always have realistic estimates of the engineering and integration needed to make that happen. Also, when we have dates set out in a bill or anywhere else that are kind of set out there in stone, you have to be careful, because sometimes it can encourage an agency to take higher risk development paths. They may do more concurrent development. They may skip testing and things like that if their progress is not going well. And that's why it's just very important to have a lot of insight into the progress NASA's making. Don't just accept what they tell you up front about what can be done and not done. You really have to have checks along the way to see what is that progress, is what they're saying really happening, and get back the knowledge that you need about technology, design, production, and all those other issues.
We were pressing for a focus on transparency and accountability, and that has certainly been the theme of a lot of your recommendations. And that's what we were looking for in Section 309 of the law. It's a reporting requirement on launch vehicle design and development, both for the initial launch system design and the subsequent annual reporting requirement. We anticipate an initial 90-day report to result in what they call a baseline program. What else do you believe that we as the Oversight Committee should be looking for to ensure the transparency and accountability?
I think as the program proceeds, you probably want to get knowledge indicators, things like technology maturity readiness levels, design stability readiness levels. It's one thing to have an architecture kind of laid out in the beginning, but as the program proceeds, you actually want to see the number of design drawings that are releasable so you can see the progress the program is making on that. Also, you need to look at things like management reserves, the funding that's being available to the program, and things just like how is the contract working. In the Constellation program, the contract was undefinitized for a very, very long period of time, meaning that a lot of things were still in flex, and you couldn't set baselines down early on to manage contractor progress. So there are a lot of just key knowledge indicators that I think are typical in any type of review of a program that you want to keep following as the program proceeds.
Senator Hutchinson? Does any of the staff? Okay,
Thank you all very much.
Yes.
This has clarified a lot, and I think we can all go forward now, I think, very productively. Thank you.
To put it in the vernacular, we can all get hitched up in the harness, all pulling in the same direction. What's at stake is very, very important. And that is the future of our American space program. And we're at a critical juncture here for everybody that has helped us get to this point, which I believe the President this is his vision for a vigorous space program, both human and unmanned. And so I hope we've brought to light some clarity on the future direction as a result of this hearing. And with that, the hearing is adjourned, and thank you.
Thank you.